Welcome to 1111. I have Shawn here today. Hey, Shawn.
Hey Tony, great to be with you, man.
Yeah, me too. I've been super excited about this episode because of how many conversations you and I have gone through, and each of them being like an hour long on various topics. We've done it for the last 5 years. And so if you think about that, I mean, we probably discuss about 20 times a year. And we probably put 100 hours of just inner work conversations in the last 5 years. So it's
Yeah,
cool to kind of think about all those conversations and like, okay, today we're going to come in and try to do this in 30 minutes. So let's see.
the ultimate challenge.
That's right. Well, the first question I always ask, Shawn, is what does inner work mean for you? And how did you stay committed?
Yeah, I like that question. I didn't really know what inner work meant. I've been to therapy on some level since probably 2011, and I'd gone through the various gambits of like talk therapy. I was lucky enough to find a community up here in Milwaukee. I was lucky enough to author um, a chapter in a book that was kind of widely, distributed among my friends and social of a very personal story of childhood and things like that. And that was all great and very therapeutic and very instrumental. But I didn't really ever connect to like me. And like I think it gave me maybe some comfort in the short run and maybe some kind of superficial, maybe building blocks to how to take care of myself and how to learn the importance of vulnerability and being in service to others, all these wonderful, noble things. But when you get to this topic of inner work, I think it surpasses a lot of those things and really gets into an understanding and acceptance and celebration even of self and just who we are. You know, Tony, you and I have known each other for probably on some level 20 years, but definitely the last 7 or 10 have gotten close. And then through the Great Man Mastermind, definitely the last five, very connected. But I just know that if we grew up in the same neighborhood, we would be pals. We would be running around, getting into stuff, adventuring, skin knees, the whole bit. And part of me really connects to that with inner work because we are these little children in these, and I'm just recently 48, so I'm in this 48-year-old suitcase, but still very much childlike, especially when I'm at my best, and still connected to that little guy running around. So I think that is a big difference between some of the more traditional talk therapy and other things that I think is like a ladder that people climb. And the more curious they get, or the more that they want, the more understanding they want, the deeper they want to go. I think that's kind of a natural progression towards inner work. And luckily, through you, I found an avenue to that. But yeah, inner work is a really deeper understanding of self. And I guess I can leave it there and we can elaborate on that and unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, you mentioned a bit of childhood playfulness, being in touch with our inner child or our younger self. And I think that's really where authenticity, authenticity comes from, that I think you begin to unravel through this whole experience. You'll be able to tap into that inner child and embrace it. And I think you become more imaginative, more playful in your everyday life. Has that shown up for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll tell you that that playfulness and that childlike authenticity, I think I've noticed as I look back, it's our attachments that combat with that authenticity. Sometimes it could be attachments to parents. I mean, every kid has an attachment to their parents. They want their parents to never abandon them, of course, like them, feed them, take care of them, love them, support them, push them in the sports or activities, or just let them stay out late, whatever they're wanting to do. But like, it seems like attachment to parents, but you can have an attachment to like your family customs and maybe a religion or other sorts of like belief systems. You have attachments to kids at school that you might want to hang around, or you like them, or you find you're at your best when you're with some of them, or maybe you're getting into stuff, and so you got that sense of adventure or curiosity that other kids. But one of the biggest things I've learned is about attachment, and how these attachments to things that we kind of want to try out. It could be being cool. That might be one of the major attachments that I think distracts us from our authenticity. And I think a lot of kids probably try stuff out, and then they veer off of self, and then they forget to kind of come back.
There's an aspect around your identity through that attachment reflection. I like to call it maybe valued identity. When you look at, are your values truly yours, or have they been influenced by someone else? And are you holding on to a value because it makes so much of your identity from someone
Yeah.
else? They have these expectations of you. You think that's why you're important to them,
Hmm.
and that becomes your valued identity to them, and it ingrains in you, and now you think that's a value, and but really, is it? When you step back and say, is that truly yourself?
Yeah, so I think that outlines the importance of, if you've lost touch with your inner child or your most authentic self, which however you identify it, and it could be different, you know, because we do learn along the way and we grow along the way. But yeah, so to me, inner work means getting back in touch with little Shawnee Paul Hitman and just realizing, hey, it's okay to have veered. We learned, but now we're back here. We're back home. We're back on home base. And where do we go from here? We're 48 years in. Hopefully, we got 48 to go. And it's just a great awareness of, hey, sometimes you mess around and find out.
Mhm.
And I think what's important is, yeah, mess around, find out, but then come back home with your new information, and then you make a decision of your authentic self of like, hey, do we want to hang out with Billy again? Because the kid is like, yeah, he's adventurous. We do a lot of fun stuff, but man, it's a little dangerous, and I don't really know how I feel about that. And so I mean, I think that's what life is really, especially as you're growing up, but even later on, like, hey, I need this job, or there's this girl I like, or there's this thing that I want. It's wonderful to learn through experiences, but I think the big challenge and the reward is to bring it back home and say, okay, what did I just learn, and what of it is me, and what do I want to keep in my life, and what do I kind of move on from, like having learned the lesson, and hey, I'm glad I tried that. Now I know for sure, and I'm going to govern the rest of my life differently for it.
Mhm. It does take a bit of maturity to have that type of reflection. And I think there's a second piece in there that where our group is facilitated really made you look at what's your best version of yourself, and
Yes.
what do you value? What are your boundaries? And what's really important for you? And I think that's an important piece of that equation you're talking about in the reflection to come into it, because it's one thing to go through experiences and reflect on it, but I also think you need to be forward thinking of, okay, who am I becoming? What's my foundation now? And apply that into what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was one of the keys of when I thought of inner work, and like, how do I stay committed to that learning process and that growth process. I think in Japanese they call it kaizen, which means like constant improvement. But for me, I kind of like constant learning, or constant questioning, or maybe constant curiosity. The reason to stay committed is it probably comes from a realization that I am only my best when I am as close to my authentic self as possible. And that means a lot of times less attached to things outside of me that might not truly serve me. It might be a fad or might be a season that I'm in, like it could be something like pickleball, or maybe it's a new relationship. But if it pulls me away from me, then it's something that I want to be aware to just dabble and then come back home. So in that way, I think I stay committed by putting my authenticity as my number one goal. No matter what I'm doing, if I want to be successful at it, I know that I have to be me first. It could be in my career, in sports, in love, in friendships, in any arena in life. I'm only going to experience it the best when I'm me. And so that's what's in it for me to stay committed. And
Hmm.
it's a constant practice because I get distracted regularly, but I'm a lot more aware of how distracted I am, and that awareness brings me back home to me quicker than it had in the past. And I
Hmm.
think that's the victory.
Hmm. Well, you've hinted on some things that you've applied in your life to, really make a difference. What else from the past 4 or 5 years sticks out for you that you've learned and applied in your life that's made a difference?
In the same line as authenticity, it's the power of vulnerability. That's one of them. So vulnerability, I think, goes on a spectrum, where some days you might step out this far and hey, well, that was some vulnerability and I'm good there. And then in other times, you kind of push a boundary and get out of your comfort zone. There's been enough quotes out there in the world that say, hey, all the growth happens outside of our comfort zone, so that I know that that's a good positive thing long term, but it can be really scary at the time. And I think the other one is the responsibility of self-awareness, that we are the only ones who have a choice and have the responsibility over our lives. So being aware and being conscious of kind of what we're doing and how we're operating and how we're showing up in the world, it is our responsibility. In fact, it's probably our biggest responsibility. And so those are two ideas. I think when you ask me, what have I kind of learned and what am I applying in my regular day-to-day life? Um, yeah, those are things that are 180 degrees different now, and I can go into a little of that with respect to vulnerability. I had been in men's group therapy for sexual abuse endured as a child. I had written a book, co-authored a book. I wrote a chapter in a book that was put out on Amazon and put out for all the world to see. I was on live television a couple times in the Milwaukee market, and those were elements of like vulnerability that they were really scary, but really, really good for me to feel like okay with my story, with like this part of me. But there really wasn't any inner work part to that. And so when we had our mastermind retreat in Scottsdale, I remember we went through the great man meditation. There's the music and the prompting, and you basically meeting face to face with your great man. And for me, it was great because as a meditator, I've never really felt that I was able to either fully surrender and fully capture the experience, but this time was different. And I remember coming out of that meditation, and I remember my hands were just radiating for really no reason. And we split into groups and we were decompressing. Hey, what would your great man say to you now? Or how did your great man view you? How did you view your great man? And I remember one of the guys from the group, he was complaining earlier about some shoulder pain. And so I just thought to myself, I was like, hey, well, I don't know. Let's see what happens here. And so I put my hands right on his shoulder. And not kidding, I don't think he was making it up. After like, 15, 20, 30 seconds of that, he's moving his shoulder around. He's like, wow, that feels incredible. And I think it's very common for me, but also a lot of us, to always look outward. How can I help others? How can I add value to others? But it's very rare for me to turn things around on myself and to put myself in the spotlight. And but for whatever reason, instinct kicked in. Something told me, "Hey, Shawn, if your hands are really healing another human being, why are you so special? Maybe you should turn them around on your own heart." And I just decided I put them over my heart and I felt the radiation through my chest. I could feel my own hands radiating on my own skin into my own heart. And I just kind of sat there for a minute thinking, Shawn, it's really time you heal your heart. I had truly endured a an extraordinary amount of conflict and trauma and pain and hurt in my life, especially in those recent years. But very slowly, I started to sort of succumb, and these emotions were just really welling up inside to me. This sadness, this anger, this some of it was like woe is me, and some of it was really deep seated, uh, in my guts. And after some time, I hunched over. I remember hunching over, and I started to cry. I started to actually, cry. And it started to get to the point where my guts hurt and kind of tightened up. And before too long, I'm on the floor. I'm on my knees. I'm on all fours, and I'm now crying uncontrollably. Like this isn't just a regular like sobbing. I'm I'm going through this. I'm crying like I never have before. All I can remember is just feeling it all coming out and coming up to my head and seeing things going back a long, long time, things I thought I'd long forgot about, and I was experiencing all of it, and I wasn't fighting any of it. I just let it come, but by the end of it, I was full blown bawling uncontrollably, like in a way like I almost couldn't breathe. I could feel my face and all the veins in my head were popping out and I was just flush, but I was wailing the way a child probably would. But yeah, I was letting go of decades of stuff, and there were men still in the room, and there were men down the hall, and it was kind of like in my very favorite movie ever, The Princess Bride, where Wesley's getting tortured and he's yelling and the whole village hears him. It kind of like, if I remember, it kind of felt a bit like that, like and guys from the kitchen were like, what the heck is going on back there? Yeah. So anyways, that to me was the epitome of, my own comfort with vulnerability. And I remember you were there. I remember Steve was there, and some other guys. Steve prayed over me, and which was the right move at the time. And I really, I really wasn't concerned about how, oh, this must look bad, or these guys must be really scared for me, or because we had become brothers in the months and years leading up to this. So I was comfortable, um, and I think that was, if if we go back to authenticity, that was my real authenticity, was not worrying about whether I'm scaring anybody or whether anybody is thinking like, oh my God, he must be really like troubled. He needs help. Nobody was going to try and fix anything. Nobody was trying to do anything other than support and just truly love, in a brotherly way. And it was so freeing to be that vulnerable, to be that emotional, to release like that in a place where I wasn't worried at all um, about like what anybody's thinking. I was truly, authentically as sad as I've ever been, and it was great. And then, of course, like, so this is what often happens if people haven't experienced this. It's quite wonderful. I have on a couple occasions, you know, had like a breakthrough or an emotional sort of release where the next few hours and days are like a tremendous weight is lifted off of your, it's like a yoke, being removed from the plow horse. And now all of a sudden that plow horse can run around like a racehorse. But yeah, I just remember feeling really light and feeling really connected and feeling just energetically really present, but also really calm and at peace. And so that's an event or I guess just a story of what real vulnerability kind of looks like and how it feels and how it shows up, I guess. Um,
Yeah, there's such a powerful moment to watch you go through, to experience, and see you afterwards. And it just felt like you released something that day, for sure. We created a pretty safe space for anyone to be able to have that experience and do a good cry, whatever it may need to be. And, one question I think I have is that if anybody heard this message in your story,
yeah.
what would you recommend someone to do to either bring awareness, or if they already know that they've been boggling things down, what's the best approach for them to maybe tap into that to get this release like you had?
It's really hard to kind of like give instruction because I think what happened so organically. But I think some of the key components are an open mind and a desire for self awareness, but even more deeper, self love. I truly think, Tony, that that moment cleared out a lot of gunk and just hurt and old scars and old stuff that I was able to sort of purge in that moment to make room for my own self love to kind of come in. And when I'm looking in the rear view now, that's been, I think like 2.5 years ago, my self love meter probably was dancing near the zero line for quite some time and has been remarkably more full ever since that moment. I think that moment is like a defining moment in my entire life. So to go back to like what your question was, I don't really know how I would instruct anyone to do it. I would just say get talking about and get asking questions. Therapy is not for everybody, and it's also expensive, but it's not necessary. You can do your own personal therapy with a buddy or your dog or a plant or just anything that has you saying the words, I'm sad about, I'm mad about, it freaking stinks that this happened to me, or, I mean, I think this should go without saying. We're not trying to commit to an identity of victimhood. We are trying to be responsible for the things that have happened to us, to feel those feelings, because at some point maybe they weren't allowed to be felt. Um, maybe you were brokenhearted over a romantic relationship that didn't work out, but you're so focused on maybe trying to get this person back that you forgot to feel your feelings. I guess what I'm really trying to say is really open up,
Mm-hmm.
really open up in a way and see how it feels and push boundaries.
What you said is a really good first step is like just say it out loud. Like, what are you feeling inside? And say it out loud. That's a really good start. Like, you don't know what can happen just from doing something simple as that.
Yeah, just start saying the words of what you're feeling. Try to get curious about your feelings and ask the extra questions. When was the last time I felt this way? When else have I felt this way? When I feel this way, how do I typically react? And just get really curious about getting back in touch with you.
There is something powerful that we all have, this curiosity of once we understand something, it gives us the confidence to do whatever it may be with that information. Once you can
Yeah,
articulate who you were, who you are, you're so much more confident talking about yourself.
yeah. I think there's another component here, Tony, of responsibility. And and that is a responsibility of like trying to maintain at least some of your authenticity, maybe not all of it, because you feel like, oh, to feel safe, I want to belong to this group, or to feel safe or secure, I want to, be friends with these people, or I want to be in a relationship. So it could be any number of ways where we are constantly kind of measuring like, oh, how authentic do I want to be and how attached do I want to be? But what it really comes back to is we are responsible for ourself. We're responsible for our attitude, for our experience. We're responsible for our energy and what we bring to our friendships and to these other spaces. We are responsible way more than I think we sort of talk about out loud. And I think that is probably the most important thing I could possibly say to somebody who wants real freedom is you have to be responsible. They have to be willing to take on the responsibility, and that starts with responsibility of self. And I think I have felt way more free since that moment that we talked about, where I just decided, like, hey, nobody's going to do it for me. I have to love myself enough to, you know, pursue what I want.
Mhm. Let's go back into the freedom comment because some people may feel freedom is floating through life because they don't feel that
Oh,
responsibility.
yeah, yeah, that's
Let's
interesting.
let's back into that because I can definitely see myself in those times in the past where I was floating. I
Hmm.
felt, oh yeah, I was just going with the flow. It felt like freedom at that point. But then when you have to do effort, you do have to do effort to hold the responsibility to yourself. So why would people want to put that effort in? And how do you distinguish that between the freedom you're talking about?
Now, this sounds like a classic Tony and Shawn conversation from all the last few years here, where we would just dig in on something completely out there. And I really appreciate it because this is what I really, really love. I think it is a different kind of freedom. It's the freedom from care that I think you're alluding to, where you're just kind of like going with the flow. If you have actual goals, but you are using this, well, I just want to be free from commitments or free from expectations. If you're using that as sort of an excuse not to pursue your happiness, not to pursue your dreams, then I think there's kind of like a responsibility element there that somebody is just choosing. But if I really love myself and I really want to keep this commitment and I want to be responsible to myself, I'm gonna have to not be go with the flow guy all the time. And so you know, I think there's healthy ways to do both. And that's what I love about life in general, is like finding the sweet spot and celebrating all the possibilities, but knowing ultimately I'm responsible for my energy, I'm responsible for my attitude, and I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for myself, you know?
So here's an
So
interesting
yeah.
perspective to pull it back to your story before of when you did the great man meditation and this energy was coming through you. That great man meditation, did your great man show you what future Sean's freedom looked like and the responsibility it was to get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I recall seeing myself as gaining freedom through the power and the confidence, security. I think that's the better word. Security of self and security of, doing my best and trusting that my best is always good enough and things like that, like at peace. But I would have to say that my great man wanted more intentionality out of me and wanted a little bit more commitment out of me and was showing me ways in which go with the flow is good sometimes, like on a vacation or in the right time, but it's definitely not a cure-all. So, and I think that was a way that I had to look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, Shawn, maybe you're a little too go with the flow in relationships and some other things in which I was probably allowing myself to be taken, advantage of on some level. And here's the thing, I've always seen myself in the past as a bit of a people pleaser. Here's the cowardly part of being a people pleaser is when you put other people first, you become irresponsible to yourself. But truly, I was doing it because if people around me were happy, then I had a better chance of happiness. So on some level, I'm tying my happiness to the happiness of others, which is inauthentic. And then also, I was kind of cheating myself the responsibility to figure out, no, 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 Shawn, what do you want to do? What's going to light you up? What's your best use of your effort? And so in my people pleasing, I found out that I was kind of sidestepping my responsibility to myself. And I was patting myself on the back about it, thinking, well, I'm just that guy who's just really willing to drop anything and go do this thing, willing to fit into what my friend or my girlfriend or whoever my family needs from me. And after a while, you kind of lose yourself.
Mhm.
I lost myself for sure. So going through that exercise, my great man was telling me, hey, trust your intuition. And my great man knows to trust my intuition because I'm not distracted by my attachments to people or alcohol or drugs or some of these other decisions that I have made in my life that distracted me
Mhm.
from my intuition or distracted me from my best authentic great man self.
Yeah.
And so it kind of all comes back to authenticity.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up people pleasing. I had that in my life too. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. And a key thing that you really said, it does become your identity. It does become what you feel is yourself.
Yeah. It was just always easier to um, let somebody else decide and then fall in line and then try and facilitate under the idea that, well, a classic example would be like in a relationship. Well, happy wife, happy life, right? But what what that phrase sort of denotes is that your happiness is contingent upon another person's happiness, and it's not fair to either person actually. And so, yeah, I had to learn that, and yeah, thank God I did. It took me long enough, but here I am. I feel like a completely different person. Obviously, would dedicate the rest of my life to sharing that experience with others to make sure that they learn at 38 instead of 48 or whatever,
Yeah.
as quickly as possible.
There's different aspects of you that your authenticity does shine. And it's interesting if you reflect on your experience with sexual abuse and how
Hmm.
you had written about it, was on TV, and what came to me is a phrase from Robert, who was on a previous episode, who said this exact phrase around we need to relieve our story so we're not reliving our story.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I've known Robert to be a man of great verbiage and just great. He always has the perfect words and no more perfect words than those. I think that's absolutely correct. Yeah. And I think part of inner work is noticing our patterns and our cycles Like, why do I keep dating the same woman? Or why do I keep uh, going after failing the same way in my career or, or at the gym or, it's almost always a pattern. And at the center of that cycle is us. So there's an accountability piece, but in order to break the cycle, you have to first be aware and then you have to just choose a new path. I'm not going to relive my pain. I'm not going to relive my patterns. I'm making a stand. I'm going to be aware and I want to do things differently. But yeah, those words are uh, that's a good recall on your part.
I just noticed that you really did relieve that story from your life, and
Hmm.
it's really cool to see that you never really had that as an attachment
Yeah,
for
and I
at
would
least the last 10 years I've known you. Yeah.
I would truly say that that event or episode or just release, relief that happened in Scottsdale was a big part of that. I don't really identify as a survivor of sexual abuse. I identify as a champion, of it and somebody who's willing to um, go there and go get in the muck with another person who might need an ear or might need some help or whatever. But it's really not part of my identity anymore. Now it's almost kind of like I did reverse it and I've gone back to before I was 7 years old and just be like, no, no, it's just a kid. Just, you know, sometimes stuff happens, but I've experienced it. And so I
Hmm.
kind of chalk it up to experience rather than like, oh, I'm a victim or oh, this horrible thing that happened or anything like that. I truly don't see it that way.
Hmm.
And it's been instrumental to my happiness to let that identity go and let those attachments to the past go, let that guilt and that shame go. And because it wasn't serving me, so why was I holding on to it? Like how silly, right? But try and tell somebody that who's in the middle of it. And so I want to be careful about that, but I do also want to just encourage anybody who's dealing with trauma of a sensitive nature, um, that it doesn't need to be your identity. And the quicker you get back to self, our sweet little children selves who don't fear snakes, we go and pick it up in the yard. I mean, of course, here in Wisconsin, maybe not in Texas, but like, you know, we still have the heart of a child and we're not wrapped up in fear.
Talking about your younger self is a good segue into this question because what would you tell your younger self? Now that you've gone through all these years of inner work and you know what you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try and think of because we all have different experiences growing up. We all have different parents, and all of our parents, they definitely shape our experience a lot, and that's what makes us also different. But for me personally, I think what I really needed to hear more of is I really needed more encouragement, and I use that word intentionally, encourage to help somebody make their own courage or to help somebody relieve their fear or insecurity, but to encourage myself to be more authentic. And I definitely needed to hear more of like, trust yourself and don't be afraid to make a mistake. Mistakes are just lessons that probably hurt sometimes. You know, when you're a little boy trucking around out in the burbs or out in the rural areas that I know you and I grew up in, um, messing around and getting into stuff like far away from home was kind of regular, and skinned knees and broken bones and all the things like those are all lessons. But I guess I wish I would have learned a little bit more clearly that nothing is the end of the world, you know. Um, if Ashley broke my heart on the playground in the sixth grade, or whoever it was, sorry, Ashley, but um, it's not the end of the world. Like it's it hurts only because you liked her and you wanted her to like you back, and that's sweet. I would definitely say to keep a curious heart and just always ask questions, always just get curious about everything, and just do not uh, fret about mistakes or getting caught. Like the worst thing you can do is lie about something truly, because you kind of start this pattern of inauthenticity that then gets rewarded, especially if you get away with the lie. And I don't know. I mean, when I look back, like those are some of those seminal things of like, hey, when did I start to drift away from myself? Um, what was I doing? What was I afraid of? And yeah, I would tell myself to love yourself first, put yourself first, but get curious, stay authentic, stay who you are, and just know that you are going to make mistakes and it is okay as long as you learn from it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of insights I was able to share today, Sean. So thanks. Do you have anything else on the top of mind that you would want to share today, or we can close it out?
I'm feeling really good about this, Tone. I guess here's what I'll say. We globally, whether you're paying attention to politics or weather patterns or economics or just what's going on in young people's lives, difficulty with relationships of all different kinds, stresses, job worries. There's so many distractions out there. So many distractions. I think a worthwhile thing for just anybody right now listening is just to like pay close attention to the next couple hours or just couple days of all the ways that they feel distracted from themselves. And I guess you would start with, hey, who am I really? You know, who am I at my purest, highest self, best, most authentic self? I'm not angry. I'm not afraid. So why do I respond this way or whatever? And then just take note of all the distractions that keep us away from ourselves and note that. I think that'd be a great start to just anybody's inner work journey is just being aware of distractions from yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's really good advice. I think that is a
Well,
good starting point. So thank you, good
well,
sir.
brought it full circle, I guess.
That's right. Good job. That's awesome. So appreciate it, Sean. A lot of good stuff here. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, you too, Tony.